When you're ready? Okay. My pleasure to evaluate Julie's speech, The Battle of the Ball. Now we'll look at the speech from the point of view of all the criteria in the speaker's guide, say what I thought worked well, and maybe a few tips at the end, and of course summarise my advice at the end and determine whether it's a pass or otherwise. Now the start of a speech is always very important. Is the speaker confident or nervous? If they're nervous, we feel nervous too. But the speaker came to the lectern looking confident, assumed a good stance and looked around and smiled. A great way to start the speech. Speech construction. We don't want something chaotic or disorganised, and we had a good emphatic start to the speech. This is a tale of triumph, not through military might, but football, which made me thinking, what is the connection between the two? Interesting. But the speech, it was well structured. We heard about the famous football matches many years ago between the munitions ladies in factories. We learned about the battle on the war and the pitch and England losing 3-2 to Germany. Then we had a personal story about the speaker not being able to swim but taking up football instead. So there were very different aspects to this speech, but they all mingled together very well indeed. So in our view, as evaluators, we felt the speech flowed extremely well from start to finish, incorporating all of the different elements. And the conclusion, that's important, not just the good start, but the conclusion is what we can remember. And I thought that was particularly memorable. On the battlefield, the hearts of soldiers bled for the nation, and women's hearts bleed for recognition, justice and equality. I thought that was a really great way to end, and then you finished it off with blowing the whistle yet again. Now for content and clarity, it was interesting, an informative speech, it was educational. I learned quite a few things. I'm fairly familiar with the topic. I didn't realise there were 83,000 people in the 2012 Olympic final. And I didn't realise that the FA had stopped football as an act of jealousy and control. And I thought it was just really good the way the content flowed perfectly. And do you mean what you say? To me, this is a subject to your heart, something meant a great deal to the speaker. And I could see that you could do this in the way you were speaking. It was passionate, highlighting women's struggle for equality with stories from the past. Now, when we do a speech, gestures can often greatly enhance the speech. We don't want to be superfluous, too theatrical, but yours were, Germaine, they were congruent to what you were actually saying. You had the TV image, you had kicking out with an angle, you had the running gesture, the foot on the ball, and the arm coming up slowly, showing how things were building up, and that crucial first step. They were unobtrusive. They were all highly relevant gestures, which I think added very greatly to the speech. And they were all timed perfectly with what you were saying. The voice, of course, is critical in any speech, and your voice was very clear. I was sitting towards the back, every word was very clearly enunciated, the pace was consistent throughout, it wasn't too quick, it wasn't too slow, in my view it was just right. And what I liked about that, there were various variations in the way you spoke. For example, on occasions you're passionate. Women's hearts bleed for justice. And there was some strength occasionally, an act of jealousy and control. And there were some poignant moments too. The war's outcome, disastrous for both sides. And you changed the voice on many occasions to highlight different aspects of what you were trying to say. When we speak too, we like to try and make a speech elevate, not from being too prosaic and mundane, but to make it more memorable by including word pictures and interesting vocabulary. You had some great alliteration, passionate, prejudice, persistence. And then we had the rule of three, no financial support, no infrastructure, no apology. They were great images throughout. And I like the when you do have to be in someone else's boots to understand them. I really like that. And of course, the frozen mud on no man's land. That was a very evocative part of the speech. Notes and eye contact. You've got to engage with the audience. You have to look at them in the eye, make sure they're engaged with you. And you did that. You had notes, comprehensive notes, but they were pretty good, very well used, glided gently across the lectern. Just towards the end, they were a bit more obtrusive, but by and large the eye contact was very good throughout. This is a very serious speech. You had a few little elements of humour, the oak tree in the middle of the playing field, your grandmother turned up to vote for the football match on TV, and I thought those lighter moments added to the efficacy of the speech. Audience rapport. This is a subject which has interested me, not least because my daughter is an avid football player and was outraged when she found out these stories from the past. So it was a speech which I think we all were engaged with. Now, what did I really like about the speech? What did we like about this speech and why? We liked the structure. We thought it worked very well indeed. There were some personal elements in it, but they weren't overstated. The voice was great throughout, and your passion, and when you delivered it, you really meant what you said in that speech. The only tiny tips we could think of, the notes at the end, a little bit more obtrusive, but that wasn't too bad. And I think a few pauses now and again. For example, the outcome was disastrous for all. And then stop there a little bit longer before you move on to say women working in the factories and an act of jealousy and control. Just stop there, let's take that bit in because it was a very powerful part of the speech. In conclusion, a superb speech. You fulfilled all the criteria. I enjoyed listening to it, we enjoyed listening to it, learned something, two very, very minor tips, and may I say a resounding pass. Congratulations.